They called it a joke. The men of Silver Creek thought they were clever, the kind of clever that grows in places where cruelty passes for humor. The mayor, his belly warm with whiskey and his heart cold with spite, leaned back in his chair and decided the mountain man needed to be taught a lesson. A man who lived alone above the clouds, who brought down furs worth more than most houses in town, did not fit into their rules, so they planned a trade that made them laugh before it was even done. They would give him the woman no one wanted. They told themselves she was broken. They said she was useless. They said she was a burden who would not last a week in the high country. They laughed as she was sent away, limping toward a future they expected would kill her. They believed the mountain would finish what life had already started. But they did not know Arthur Vance, and they did not know Ivy Thorne. High above the Wyoming Territory, silence ruled the land. It was not the peaceful kind. It was heavy, pressing down on a man until his own thoughts sounded too loud. Arthur Vance knew that silence better than most men knew their own families. He had lived in it for 20 years, trapping, hunting, surviving where others would freeze or starve. It was late autumn in 1874. The wind had teeth now, sharp and biting. Inside his rough cabin, Arthur sat alone, staring into the dying fire. He was a giant of a man, shoulders wide, hands scarred and thick, beard tangled from years without mirrors. He lifted a tin cup of bitter coffee. His hand shook, not from fear, but from memory. Last winter had nearly killed him. A fever had taken him in January. For days he had not been able to stand. The fire had gone cold. The water froze solid. He lay in darkness, shaking, waiting for death to finish the job. He survived, but only just. And now, as the first snow drifted past his window, Arthur knew a truth he did not like. He could not survive another winter alone. Arthur was not a man who believed in romance. He did not need poetry or smiles. What he needed was help. Someone to keep the fire alive. Someone to fetch water when he could not. Someone to survive. He stood and looked at the corner of the cabin. Stacked there were the results of a lifetime of hard work. Beaver pelts, fox, bear hides thick as armor. Down in Silver Creek, those furs were worth a fortune. Arthur pulled on his buffalo coat and stepped outside. He saddled his mule, loaded the furs, checked his rifle, and took one last look at the cabin. It was lonely, but it was his. Then he turned toward the long descent into town. Silver Creek sat in the valley like a wound in the land. Mud, noise, greed, and men who smiled too easily. When Arthur rode down Main Street, the town noticed. Conversations stopped. Eyes followed him. His mule carried wealth, and wealth drew hunger. Arthur tied up outside the Golden Nugget Saloon. Inside, smoke and laughter filled the air until he stepped through the doors. The room went quiet. The mayor, Higgins, stood from his poker table, smile slick and false. "What brings you down from the clouds?" Higgins asked. "Winter," Arthur said. "I have furs, and I need supplies. And a wife." Laughter rippled through the room, nervous and sharp. Arthur did not react. "I need someone strong," he said. "Someone who can work." The mayor's eyes lit with something ugly. He nodded slowly. "We have just the woman." Arthur did not see the glances passed between the men. He did not hear the cruel excitement building. An hour later, the town gathered in the square like it was a show. The furs lay at the mayor's feet. A king's ransom. Arthur waited. "Bring her out," Higgins called. The church door creaked open. First came the sound. Thump. Drag. Then Ivy Thorne appeared. She was small, thin, dressed in a gray dress worn soft by years of use. Her hair was tied back tight, but all eyes went to her leg. Twisted, withered, shorter than the other. She leaned on a rough crutch, each step a struggle. The crowd laughed. Arthur looked at her. Then he looked at the mayor. Understanding settled like ice in his chest. This was the joke. Ivy stopped in the middle of the street. She did not cry. She did not beg. Her hands shook, but she lifted her chin and met Arthur's eyes. Green, sharp, afraid, but unbroken. Arthur stepped forward. The crowd leaned in, waiting for anger, for rejection. Instead, Arthur lifted her. He placed her on the mule like she weighed nothing. "Hold on," he said. He spat at the mayor's feet, took the mule's lead, and walked away. The laughter died behind them. The climb back up the mountain was brutal. The path was narrow, steep, and unforgiving. The wind cut through clothes and bone. Ivy bit her lip until it bled, but made no sound. Arthur noticed. He slowed his pace, choosing smoother ground without a word. They camped that night among the pines. Arthur did the heavy work. Ivy cooked. She added wild sage to the beans, and the food tasted like something more than survival. Arthur said nothing, but he took a second helping. By the next day, the cabin came into view, dark, solid, lonely. "This is home," Arthur said. Inside, the place was chaos. Furs piled high, dirt floor stained with years of living. Cold air slipped through the walls. Arthur laid out the rules and turned away. Ivy stood there, leaning on her crutch, fear rising in her chest. Then she pushed it down. She could not hunt. She could not haul wood. But she could work. That night, as the fire burned low, Ivy looked around the cabin with clear eyes. If she was going to survive the mountain, she would have to change it, and she would. The first week on the mountain was not kind. Arthur Vance rose before dawn every morning, moving by habit more than thought. He checked the sky, judged the wind, loaded his rifle, and stepped outside into the biting cold. He did not look back to see if Ivy was watching. In his mind, work was done outside, and that work required strong legs and strong lungs. Ivy had neither. Inside the cabin, Ivy listened to the door close and waited until his heavy footsteps faded into the snow. Only then did she move. The cold crept in through the cracks between the logs, brushing her skin like fingers made of ice. She wrapped herself tighter in her shawl and looked around. The cabin was losing heat faster than the fire could give it. Arthur hauled water, chopped wood, skinned game. Ivy tried to help. She truly did. She took a bucket and made her way toward the creek, but the slope was steep and slick. More than once she slipped, spilling water into the snow. Each failure burned with shame. It took her an hour to do what took Arthur minutes. Arthur noticed. His jaw tightened each time. In the evenings, he came back exhausted, shoulders heavy, beard crusted with frost. Ivy would be sitting near the fire, mending clothes or sorting supplies. To Arthur, it looked like she was resting while he carried the mountain alone. The tension built slowly, like ice forming on a river. It finally broke one evening when a blizzard rolled in without warning. Arthur fought his way home through white fury, muscles screaming, hunger sharp as a knife. Ivy had made stew, careful and proud of it. She reached for the heavy pot. Her leg buckled. The pot crashed to the floor. Stew spilled into the dirt, soaking furs and boots and hope all at once. Arthur slammed his fist into the wall. "Damn it, woman," he roared. "I drag it in. I kill it, and you can't even set it down." The words cut deeper than the cold ever had. "They were right," Arthur muttered, turning away. "You're just another mouth to feed." Ivy stood frozen, gripping her crutch. She did not cry. She did not argue. She watched him clean the mess she had made. Something shifted inside her then. She understood the truth. She could not survive here by trying to be like him. The next morning, Arthur left before sunrise, anger still heavy in his chest. The door slammed behind him. Ivy was alone. The wind whistled through the cabin walls. Ivy felt it touch her face, steal warmth from the fire. She looked at the cracks between the logs. She looked at the door that did not seal, and an idea took hold. She could not make the fire hotter, but she could keep the heat from escaping. Ivy found old wool blankets shoved into a corner, half-eaten by mice. She tore them into strips. She braided them with dried grass from the stable. Slowly, carefully, she packed the cracks in the walls. She sealed the windows. She blocked the door's draft. It took all day. Her hands ached. Her leg throbbed, but when she finished, the cabin felt different. Still warm. Then she cleaned. She scrubbed the table with sand and water until years of grease disappeared. She sorted supplies by use. She cleared paths through the clutter so a man could move without tripping. When Arthur returned at dusk, he stopped in the doorway. The warmth hit him first. The wind no longer screamed through the cabin. The air smelled clean. The fire held steady heat instead of fighting a losing battle. Arthur said nothing. He ate in silence, but he ate everything. Later that night, he set something beside Ivy's chair. A cane, hickory, smooth, strong. "That stick you use will break," he said, not looking at her. "This won't." It was not an apology, but it was something close. Weeks passed. The mountain settled into deep winter. Snow buried the cabin. Silence returned, but it was different now. Arthur worked outside. Ivy worked within. Together, without words, they made the place livable. Then the mountain reminded them who was in charge. Late November brought a clear blue sky and deep snow. Arthur went to cut dead pine on the north ridge. The tree twisted when it fell. It struck fast and hard. The sound of bone snapping echoed through the valley. Arthur screamed. The pine pinned his leg against stone. He was trapped. 2 miles from the cabin, the sun sinking fast. Back home, Ivy waited. Arthur was never late. Dread crept into her chest. She remembered his rule, never go out in heavy snow. She took the lantern anyway. The trail was brutal. Her leg burned. The wind howled. But she followed his tracks until she found him, pale in the snow, breath shallow, eyes glassy. "Go back," he whispered. "Leave me." Ivy did not listen. She could not lift the tree. She could not drag him free, but she could think. She built a lever from branch and stone. She used her weight, her will, her fury. When the tree lifted, Arthur pulled free. She did not stop. She built a crude sled. She tied the rope around her waist. Step by step, she dragged him home. By midnight, the fever came. Infection crawled up his leg, dark and angry. Ivy worked without sleep. She gathered willow bark. She packed herbs into the wound. She forced bitter tea between his lips. For 3 days and nights, she did not rest. On the 4th morning, Arthur woke. He saw the bandages. He saw Ivy asleep beside him, and he understood. The winter that followed was long and cruel. Arthur could not walk. Ivy ran the cabin. She hunted with snares. She cured furs with care and patience. She kept them alive. Arthur watched. He learned. He learned that strength was not only in arms and legs. He learned that survival came in many forms. And somewhere between the snowstorms and the silence, Arthur Vance fell in love with the woman the town had thrown away. But the world beyond the mountain had not forgotten them. And when the thaw came, Silver Creek would see exactly what it had lost. Spring did not arrive gently in the high country. It came loud and sudden, like the mountain itself was waking from a long, angry sleep. Ice cracked along the creek with sharp reports that echoed through the valley. Snow slid from the cliffs in heavy sheets. The air smelled of wet earth, pine sap, and something new: life. Arthur Vance stepped out onto the porch for the first time without pain stealing his breath. He leaned heavily on an oak staff, his legs stiff and crooked beneath him. It would never be the same again. He knew that, but it held him. That was enough. In the yard, Ivy worked quietly. She hung the winter furs on a line, letting the sun and air finish what her hands had perfected over the long, dark months. The pelts were different now. They were soft, rich, flawless, not rushed, not careless. Each one carried hours of patience. Arthur watched her move. She still limped. She always would. But there was strength in her now that had nothing to do with legs. She moved like someone who belonged.
"The pass is open," Arthur said.
Ivy froze. For a moment, the mountain was silent again. Then her shoulders slumped. She did not turn around. "I understand," she said quietly. "I can pack." Arthur frowned and stepped closer, wincing as his leg protested. He reached out and turned her gently so she had to face him. "You ain't listening," he said. "We're going back to Silver Creek, together." Her eyes widened. Fear flashed through them. old fear, the kind that never fully leaves. "We're not leaving you," Arthur continued. "We're showing them." He gestured toward the furs. "They're worth a fortune now, and every bit of it is because of you." Ivy searched his face for doubt. She found none. They descended the mountain a few days later. 2 canes struck the ground in rhythm as they walked. 2 scars, 2 survivors. Silver Creek looked the same as ever. Mud, noise, greed. But when Arthur and Ivy rode down Main Street, the town noticed. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The mayor sat on the porch of the general store, wiping sweat from his neck. He smiled at first when he recognized Arthur. Then he saw Ivy. She sat straight on the mule, wrapped in a silver fox coat that shimmered in the sun. Her eyes were calm, steady. Arthur dismounted slowly and helped her down. Side by side, both limping, they walked toward the porch. The sound of their canes silenced the street. Arthur dropped a heavy sack onto the table. He opened it. Furs spilled out, soft as silk, flawless. Gasps rippled through the crowd.
"I didn't do this," Arthur said.
"My wife did." The mayor's smile faltered. Arthur's hand rested on Ivy's shoulder. "You called her broken. You called her useless." You laughed. His voice carried through the street. "She walked through a blizzard to save my life. She healed me when I was dying. She turned a cave into a home." Arthur picked up the supplies he had bought: flour, sugar, coffee, a bolt of blue silk. "Come on, Mrs. Vance," he said. They left without waiting for an answer. The mountain welcomed them back in silence, honest silence, the kind that lets a person breathe. Years later, travelers spoke of a cabin high in the peaks, of a mountain man who walked with a limp and a sharp-eyed woman beside him. They said the furs from that place were the finest in the territory. They said the fire never went out, and they said that if you listened closely, you could hear 2 canes tapping together on the porch at dusk.